Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers. I actually did watch the show that this is sort of based on, not really about, I guess. The characters are from, let's go with that. When it aired, although it was syndicated, so aired is a relative concept, but I did watch it, I guess, around its original sort of run. So I do actually have actual nostalgia for it. It was kind of only really big for like one school year as a kid, which feels like a lot longer when you're a kid, as it only actually had one season syndicated, I believe. Or at least it was only really big that year, the first 1990, somewhere around there. And I did really like the show at the time. And I don't know if this show and Chip 'n Dale have really lived on the way, something like DuckTales has, those other properties. And while watching this, it became pretty clear, because I didn't watch this with my daughter and kids and stuff. My wife and I watched this, and it seems that this is sort of what I was talking about before with Space Jam. It's basically that this is a kids movie for adults. And I think it's much better than the new Space Jam. This is a really weird phenomenon, because I don't really see this as a movie for little kids, even though it's on Disney Plus. And Chip 'n Dale were able to be rebooted once before. Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers is technically a reboot. Chip 'n Dale were characters in the theatrical shorts. I'm not sure, they were never like the biggest characters in the theatrical shorts, but they had their own thing, basically. So it is interesting that this time they've rebooted them sort of in a way that's like less accessible, when that worked so well the second time. But I also find this whole genre almost very referential, films that are more for the parents than the kids, but are still very much kids movies. I find it very kind of perplexing. I didn't really see this coming. I'm not sure if it's like due to low birth rate right now and everything like that. And people are like, well, I never get to see kids movies, so I'd like a kids movie that appeals to my specific millennial demographics and things. And it's like, that's weird, but yeah, sure, that's fine. That's the element of it that I like, and also understand why this is an incredibly niche film. Now, I am in that niche because when MC Scat Cat showed up, or Roger Rabbit, I was like, oh cool. Or even He-Man and Skeletor. Like, a lot of these cameos were hitting nostalgia buttons like crazy. They even had cameos in this that make no sense, and I don't understand how Disney signed off on, like a Butthead cameo, Randy Marsh cameo, and then especially they got a Robert Crumb reference. Like, it seemed like you have to be older to go, what the fuck? Like, everyone else was talking about the other two, but like serious, like Robert Crumb never comes back to animation. Did he sign off on the fucking Chip 'n Dale movie? Because that's insane to me. And Disney was like, yeah, no, Mr. B Natural can be in Chip 'n Dale. That's so bizarre. The references were all over the place. A lot of people thought Betty Boop was in this, including my daughter. She was not. That's interesting. But this is about Chip 'n Dale, who broke up in the 90s because Dale was going to make this other show called Double O Dale, which apparently they have not decided to make a really cool pilot of and just put it up on Disney Plus, which is a total mistake, I think. But you could make James Bond Jr. with Dale. That sounds amazing to me. That's what I would do. Call me Disney, because I have whole ideas of ripping off and referencing James Bond Jr. Where's the nostalgia for that? And that's not. Chip 'n Dale broke up because Dale wanted to do something else. It ruined Rescue Rangers, which was huge in popularity. All these years later, they found Monterey Jack, the mouse from the show, needs their help. They both show up, get reunited, and then have to go on a mystery to find Monterey Jack. They think he's been kidnapped by this gangster played by Peter Pan, and he goes and apparently kidnaps tunes and bootlegs them, basically like redrawing them so they can make bootleg animated movies, and Chip 'n Dale sort of have to stop it. Now, I think one of the things about this film, and I've heard this discussion of comparing this to Roger Rabbit, and Roger Rabbit's better, or Chip 'n Dale's better, and all this. I think the context of Roger Rabbit being a landmark moment in film history, and Chip and Dale being like this thing they put on Disney Plus should make this a discussion that doesn't need to happen, because in 100 years, Roger Rabbit will still be a part of film history. And I'm not trying to be a dick here or anything, but I just don't see that for Chip and Dale. I still had fun, so let's calm that down. But I think the difference here is, what is the overall point of the story and of doing this? And I don't really think there is one. You could say that Disney getting really mad at people who bootleg their shit or make, their shitty knockoffs that they sell at Target or whatever, and this is their way to revenge, to like compare it to like either human trafficking or drug kingpins. Not morally, if you look into that, that's not great. There's no way Disney comes off not looking like really conniving to undermine an entire sub animation industry that sure rips them off even though they're billionaires, but like there's nothing good is coming from really diving into the morals of that shit. If there's really a whole plan, and there's a lot of things like that, much like the whole thing with like using Peter Pan, what happened to his voice actor after Disney said they were going to pick up an extension on his contract and just sort of like dumped him as soon as he had acne. That's really what happened. They didn't so much rip up his contract, they just were like, we're gonna renew it. No, we're not. And then just like threw him out. I have a lot of questions of management and his family and their choices, which are also pretty horrible. But this film just chose not to get into that. They just have Peter Pan. I get the idea of like, he never grew up and he grew up. It's like, I saw Hook, I get it. But I don't know if that fully makes sense. They probably could have picked somebody else, since people are reading into that, and it's like, you can read into that when you hear how he ended up and everything that happened to him and all that stuff, specifically because he was fired doing promotion for Peter Pan specifically. Like, he had a live action career doing Treasure Island for Disney and stuff like that, and then he did television promotion for Peter Pan, and they were like, whoa, this kid's got zits, get him the fuck out of here. And that was like literally what happened. So the reason, Peter Pan being tied so much to this one actor's downfall, I don't like that. Anyway, I do think this is a fun movie overall. It has a lot of references. John Mulaney and Andy Samberg, I kind of like their back and forth for the most part. I don't remember, I sort of remember the ideas of the Chip and Dale characters. I thought they worked well within them, and sort of when they played with the show, I kind of did feel like oftentimes they're just like throwing out any reference they could. That's why you have a Robert Crumb reference, I guess. Like, wouldn't it make more sense to just have like Disney afternoon references, and which I think they did most of the shows that they were on with at the same time. I don't remember a Tailspin reference, but I'm sure it's there somewhere. It's just more pointed. I feel like there's an idea of what they're saying. Like, Roger Rabbit might just be like, the movie Chinatown under a different name, but it's sort of, there are ideas behind what it's doing, and there's ideas of corporate greed and like the evolution of Los Angeles, and there's like a lot of ideas to talk about there. In Chip and Dale, it's like, I think this film sort of falls apart, and I'm not necessarily comparing it to Roger Rabbit, but I did feel that while I was watching it, like it does similar beats you've seen before in other places and things like that, and you sort of like know where it's gonna go. But I still like generally liked it. I think this is an okay movie. I of the films that Akiva Schaffer has directed, it's not as bad as like The Watch, if we remember that, which I don't think anyone does, or that he directed it, so sorry about that, Akiva. But and this isn't fully a Lonely Island film, even though you have Akiva Schaffer and Andy Samberg. You do not have Yorma, which is like, I don't know what happened there, but or if he was just doing other stuff or didn't want to. So we only get one of the co-directors of Popstar in this, and two comedy writers who are still good, and I think they did a good job. But this isn't really a Lonely Island movie. It's probably closer than we get right now. I don't know if they're going to make another one, but I get that animation fans, especially of a certain age, are really talking about this movie, but I've literally heard no one else. If you didn't grow up with this and you aren't into animation, I've just heard fucking crickets. Everyone's talking about how like who's in their 30s or 40s or something, how they should have released this in theaters and stuff. I'm like, I don't necessarily think that. I think this is a very fun, this is the kind of stuff streaming's made for, like niche stuff, and it works very well with that, and we have a lot of fun with it, and it's cool seeing all the references and seeing Chip and Dale in their second reboot that's now meta and all this stuff. That's fine. But I've not heard kids in the playground being like, Chip and Dale, yay! Like, this doesn't inspire that. The ugly Sonic thing is very funny. Again, that's a thing that, like, is such an animation in joke. I'm glad they did it. I thought it was a cool idea. But, especially, like, I don't know how did Sega sign off on that? Like, how they legally did all this would be more interesting. I've heard a couple of people say that, but especially the ugly Sonic thing, because that's like, I don't think Paramount's like super in love with that being brought up again, but I guess they let them do it. Or all the Uncanny Valley jokes, which I like because that was funny, or the cats playing in the trash and stuff like that. They did have some, like, a lot of clever things in it, and this is the kind of movie when I was a kid I would watch several times to get like every little stupid reference I could, and I totally get if people want to do that, and you should if you want to do that. But this just feels a very insular film, and it's a film that, like, I think totally exists within that, totally exists to have a good time, but isn't saying anything larger, I don't believe at all, or anything new necessarily. Does that make it bad? No, just because it's not as original. But I think having, or that it doesn't have a point, though, I think sort of does, because it's just like, why did we do this other than just to sort of do it? It reminded me more of like a TV movie that reunited a bunch of people just to do it and get the money in than anything else. This was more clever at it than a lot of those things are, but I just, like, you know, it is weird that we have kid movies for adults. This is the best one I've seen so far. It plays with the nostalgia. It's like fun, you know, it's sort of based on a thing. They have somewhat of a grounding to it. I don't really think they understand why they're doing it grounded other than budget constraints and things like that and having these references. But, like, again, like, let's make a point to those references. I think one of the things about the better ones of these, where you combine live action and animation, whether it be Luigi's Back in Action, Roger Rabbit, the ones that do work, is they understand why they're having characters interact there. They get the theory behind it, they get the kind of characters they're moving toward, they're having in it, and it didn't really feel like this really exists within that. I think for a film that was entirely unfocused on what its narrative was really saying, it manages to tell, like, a whole story of it. It just, in the end, why? And if you're like, well, nostalgia or I remember or something like that, I'm like, well, yeah, but that's like, this film sort of works on a surface level, a fun surface level, sure, and I generally kind of like the meta stuff and everything, but at the end of the day, if you're asking why, I guess they're kind of just saying why not, and you go, okay, and that's sort of Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. You just sort of accept it, have a good time with it, and you sort of move on. But I don't think it's going to, like, a thing that'll be lost to a generation that used to remember it. And I think escaping that, it will probably just sort of, you know, stay within the confines of, you know, sort of millennials and people that grew up with it and older animation fans and things like that. I don't see this ever breaking free of it, and probably most people who are younger. Kind of a fun meta comedy that 2/3 of Lonely Island worked on, and it's a decently entertaining movie under the limitations of what it is. So if you've seen Chip and Dale and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.